quiet quitting. It's not a new phenomenon. It's an interesting one because it's come back to the fore right now, but it is not a new phenomenon. The idea of work to rule, which has been put in place by unions when they are involved with a job action, that's an example of it. Retirement in place, when you are basically just waiting until retirement, so you're doing the bare minimum as you wait out your final days. So quiet quitting has been around for a while. Why it's showing up now is interesting to me in particular, because I think it has a lot to do with the ramping up that we are experiencing right now as we emerge from the global pandemic that has been going on for the past 2 to 3 years. First, with the global pandemic, we had a lot of things that were thrust into action that were probably going to happen anyway. Remote work was on the rise. The idea of dealing with more results-oriented work as opposed to time-oriented work. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that basically you're being judged by the results you get with the work you do as opposed to the time you're spent on the job. That kind of thing has started to rise up as well. But then all of a sudden things started to go back to normal. First off, there's no going back to normal, and there's no new normal. There just is what's going on right now. And what's interesting to me is this quiet quitting movement is just really a matter of bad communication, primarily from employers right from the get-go. And there is a real opportunity right now, and there was leading up to this whole, movement of quiet quitting that employers could have taken advantage of. And they didn't, at least not all of them. Quiet quitting really is the result of not being clear with expectations. Let me explain. An employer tells an employee, here's what we expect. And an employee does that. Them doing that and nothing more is them doing their job. But there has been this era, especially the era of productivity in terms of doing as much as possible in as little time as possible, where this term above and beyond, this term of, going the extra mile was equated to going past what was expected of you. And if you didn't do that, then you weren't doing the job. That's where things have gotten misaligned. You can go above and beyond within the boundaries of the expectations of the work that you're supposed to do, of the position that you're in, of the parameters of your employment. You can go the extra mile within that as well. But there's been a misalignment of, if you're not doing more than what we expect, then you're actually not doing what we expect. It's no wonder that employees are confused, because they're like, well, wait a minute, you're burning me out. You're asking me to do more than what we agreed to, and I'm getting punished for that. So I'm just going to just do the job, and there's nothing you can do about that. And employers are saying, well, that means that you're really not doing the job, and we're going to pressure you to keep doing what we consider to be the job until you either do it or we find a way to get rid of you. That's where this idea of quiet quitting is really coming on the employee side, on people who are working. Is like, I'm only going to do what I'm supposed to do, so therefore I'm quiet quitting. That's not really, you're just doing your job. So how do you stop quiet quitting? And it all boils down to communication. If you're an employer and you have this sense that you have people that you think are quiet quitting on you, or you're an employee and you feel like you are quiet quitting, then it's time to have that conversation with your employer to get clear about what expectations are. You need to set your boundaries as an employee based on the agreement that you have with your employer, and employers need to set boundaries as well, and they need to be agreed upon. And if they're not, then essentially you're no longer quiet quitting. You're either going to have the job, you're going to understand what is expected of you, no more, no less, and you can make the choice whether you want to go and do more than what's expected if you want, or just do what's expected. But if you do less than what's expected, and that communication's been had, then there can be repercussions for that. Of course, that's, I think, understood. But if you're unclear, if the expectations were never set when you started working for someone, or someone started working for you, and you're kind of setting them as you go, there's no expectations to manage. This is the time to set expectations, have a conversation about those expectations, and then have the boundaries put in place on both sides of the equation. That's how you stop it. But it involves a tough and challenging conversation from the employer to the employee, or vice versa. Now, not every employer is going to be open to this. Some employers really want to get back to, like, let's crank things out as quickly as possible. Let's go back to the way things were. There's no going back. We all felt like, hey, the world slowed down a little bit and it feels kind of nice. But now that things are starting to speed back up again, the question is, do we want to get back to that breakneck pace that leads to burnout, overwhelm, overwork, and the rise of quiet quitting? Or do we want to have those conversations now before things speed up so fast that there's no time to have these conversations? A lot can be dealt with just clear, candid conversations between employer and employee. You can learn a lot from those conversations as to whether or not you have a future with that company, or whether that employee has a future with your company, and what it will take to, get things aligned. But it takes the conversation to happen. It takes the effort. It takes the intent of having that conversation, so that when all is said and done, everyone on both sides understands what the expectations are. And then you can do with them what you will. But that will eliminate the idea of quiet quitting, because you're either going to live up to those expectations, go beyond them, and that's, as an employee, you're right. But then you can't say, hey, I'm doing way more than I'm expected of. Why am I not getting more as a result? If those expectations are set and they're managed and they're understood, then you're doing that of your own volition. Or finally, you're not meeting those expectations. And that can happen from both sides of the equation too. So if you're not meeting what is expected of you as an employee, then there will be repercussions. And conversely, if you are an employer and you're asking more than what's expected, then you're not living up to your side of the conversation. You're not managing expectations. And that's on you. There's no set it and forget it with this kind of thing. There's no set it and forget it with time management, because again, time moves on whether we want it to or not. There's no set it and forget it with productivity, because things change, priorities shift, ingredients such as people or places or resources come into play or leave, and that changes things as well. Technology, innovation, all those things evolve. So do expectations. But they can only evolve if you know where they started. And this is the time to have that conversation. Again, will not be an easy one, but it's a necessary one. Quiet quitting doesn't have to be the end. In fact, it can be the beginning, and not just in the role that you currently have or the role that you currently offer. It could be for every role going forward. There's been articles through CBC here in Canada about it. There's been obviously the viral TikTok video that kind of spawned a lot of this for a lot of people. There have been tweets about this. Adam Grant in particular shared one. But at the end of the day, quiet quitting, dealing with it, comes down to having candid and clear conversations. We may not be able to stop quitting altogether, but the quitting might not have to be so quiet if we have those conversations.